everyone. Today we're talking about how to make a YouTube channel, a proper one, if you will, and what tools to use with a good friend of mine, Dustin Polyinnovator. Now, if you don't know Dustin, this man has tested so many different tools. We're going to talk about that today. He is a true expert in the field of not only tools, reviewing, but blogging and so many different social platforms. It is an absolute treat to have him on, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more about what he does. But what's better way to get started than to start right here? Dustin, it is so good to have you with us. Dustin, how are you?
I'm good. You?
I am so good. I'm so excited to have you on. So, Dustin, if someone is just joining and they don't know what Polyinnovation and Polyinnovators are, could you give just a quick little intro to what your world's like and what you do?
Thank you for having me. Polyinnovator is my personal brand. It is a name that I came up with out of this idea of a polymath of innovation. A polymath is usually the word that people ask me about, and that is someone who is a multi-expert in three or more many different areas and an insatiable curiosity, and that is what my main niche is about. Knowledge management for people like that, knowledge management for polymaths. From there, I played around with a ton of different tools for that, organizing my life, and so I found myself digging into more and more different rabbit holes. And over the time, I was like, I need to find a way to repurpose my content. I need to find a way to remake my website or get my YouTube channel better. How do I become a podcaster? And I found so many different tools for all these different categories. And eventually I just had to make a list. And from that list, I made a database that people can access. And that's where I came up with the Polyinnovator, is to be like, okay, I'm someone who's going to innovate in many different areas. And one thing I wanted to do was content. So that's where the Content Polymath sub-brand came to be.
That I just have to say is, we're talking through, like, I think that's such a unique thing, especially because a lot of people have a lot of different focuses, and YouTube as a platform really wants a unique focus per channel. And I know that's something you and I have talked about, and that's something that, as a platform evolves, it's going to naturally happen. But you've done a great job, in my opinion, especially in balancing that. So I kind of want to get started in a first question as someone who's reviewed thousands of tools, and I say that because on your site you have over 1,000 in your directory. What actually qualifies as a really useful tool versus something that just kind of looks impressive on a landing page? Because I think we've all been there. A tool looks great, the landing page is amazing, and then you use it and you're like, oh. So how do you qualify that difference?
I think that a landing page does make a big difference. Like, you can judge a book by its cover in a lot of ways. Like, I found my podcasting tool originally because it was a lifetime deal on AppSumo. And when I went to one site, I was like, this does not look like they took much effort to make it. And that's a good indication that the tool itself may not be good as well. But conversely, it could be a great landing page, but then the tool could be crappy. So you have to kind of judge it based on a lot of other factors, such as like their marketing, maybe they have enough content showing off the tool. I always like seeing the interface in person, whether
Sure.
it's by me doing it or by watching the video. I actually fell in love with Ghost CMS because I was able to demo it on someone's website, and that was able to get my hands on the back end. So that's one of the things where, like, I do judge a book by its cover when it comes to their main landing page, but there's also a matter of actually digging into it. And so I can't say I've reviewed every single tool on the database. I've tried to look at every single one of them in the back end as much as possible, but that's why I'm going to separate the ratings from the actual, like, okay, here's a tool, here's my rating of it, that kind of thing.
And I think that's natural one, just because that's kind of what I've noticed when it comes to just different use cases of things. You want to separate sometimes just your initial reaction to a long-term use. And I think that's a great way to kind of, well, for lack of a better term, innovate, because well, it's in your name. But also, I think it's very important to do. Another thing I want to just talk about, if someone doesn't know what AppSumo is, it's just a great place where you can find lifetime software deals. Back in the day, a lot of people know that I used to work at TubeBuddy, and a lot of what is, we've talked about this publicly. We used AppSumo a lot in those early days to help people just know what it is. So whether you are, an established creative or you're thinking about offering a lifetime deal, AppSumo is actually really helpful. And I love that you brought that up, because I haven't actually had a chance to bring that up a lot. You also mentioned Ghost, and I got to give you flowers because we actually officially have started our own blog, and someone, if you guys could figure out, in this call convinced me that Ghost was actually a right way to go. Ike, my co-founder, says hello, and we're setting up Ghost really soon. So I just wanted to give you your flowers and say thank you. So when you were using Ghost, I'll just use that as an example. I know you've, again, thousands of tools. What did you like about it? And, a lot of times people look for the best tool. What about that tool for you stood out?
I just wanted to also touch on the AppSumo thing real quick. I don't use that same podcasting tool anymore, and we can get into that later if you like, but essentially it allowed me to get started though. And that's what I
Right.
wanted to bring into the Ghost situation, where it's like I was using WordPress, I tried Medium, and I actually went back to WordPress after Medium, but over and over and over again, I had issues with organizational factors, with tagging, and finding what's up, James, finding ways to organize my content, especially since I have so many different topics: content creation, knowledge management, education, self-education particularly. And I found that Ghost, because it didn't have categories and tags, it only had just the one tags, it allowed me to simplify the process, and using a nice theme too, visually organize all those different topics. And then on top of that, it was 100 times faster than WordPress. It was also a matter of being able to keep things simple on the back end. So when I'm writing, there's a nice flow of thoughts. When I've used other tools like Substack or even Beehive, the interface of writing would get in the way of actually accomplishing the blog post.
Now, a lot of creators, especially on YouTube, they know, oh, I need a newsletter, I need a blog, I need all these things. But to start them is a monumental task, let alone test those tools, right? So when you were looking at those, what was your immediate thought and value of having a blog, having those different assets? Because a lot of creators, I have to learn creating content, let alone managing a list. So how did you balance those things? And what would you say to people who are trying to balance them themselves?
One thing I talk about a lot with the Content Polymath newsletter is that I want you to find a content medium that you particularly enjoy. If you like being on camera, if you like talking, then perhaps that's your medium. Some people don't know that, and some people need to actually get comfortable on camera. I definitely did. I was very uncomfortable. And even live streaming, like right now, I'm comfortable. Obviously with you make me more comfortable too, but live streaming is still new to me. I still have to kind of be on, like, not on edge, but on the performance, right? I want to make sure I give a good in order discussion further along. So yeah, I even messed up there thinking about what I was going to say.
Oh, you're all good. Look, let it happen live, right?
Yeah.
You're doing something that we practice, which is, published beats perfect, because you'll never get that. So I'm just happy you said yes. You let me on your show, and I'll make sure to have that linked in the description if you guys would like to check it out. It was such a fun time.
It was.
But I think you're doing a great job. Keep going.
So the idea was though, like, okay, if someone likes to talk, maybe a podcast or a YouTube channel if they could be on camera. If they don't like being on camera, start off with a podcast. If you have a lot of thoughts, but you can't say it out loud, it's all in your head, maybe writing is the way to go about it. One thing a lot of people don't realize about me is I consider myself more of a writer first, then a YouTuber, then a podcaster. And that's because I've always just kind of originated from that writing source. Even when I'm making all of my videos, I might write the blog post version of that video first, and vice versa, because I do love YouTube and I do love videos. But I'm a mixed person. A lot of people might just be one or the other. I encourage you to do all three, but you have to kind of experiment to find out which one you are most aligned with.
And I think that goes back to a core value I have, which is use or do what works best for you, especially when it comes to content creation. But there's a caveat to that, and you have to understand the platform. So one thing we have, which is the can-do method here, which is, knowledge, is our first one, is you got to be knowledgeable of platform changes and like what's out there. And I think that you study that knowledge more than anyone. When you are getting up to speed and you see tools from every angle, because you've reviewed so many, what surprised you the most after reviewing hundreds or maybe thousands? Like, what still surprises you about new tools?
I like the way that people innovate the ways of using the tool. So there's like a tool called Video Tap, and I haven't had a chance to dig into it too much, but it's one of the few tools that can take your video and make it into written content. And I think Headliner might be going towards something down the line. There's also Recast Studio, where you can take a live stream like this or a podcast and use it to make LinkedIn posts or emails or tweets and maybe quote images. And I think there's a great way of repurposing that. People know about making clips, but they don't think about making written content repurposed from video. And there's a lot of aspects behind that that I really get excited about, especially when there's tools that come out that fit different niche holes in the market.
No, I think that, you're finding new ways to streamline your process, finding new ways to do the things you love. And I think that makes a lot of sense, especially because as you've seen so many tools, I'm sure there are things that you like, things that you're like, oh, not again. What is one thing that if someone is trying to make a tool or thinking about starting a tool that you're kind of just sick of seeing? I'm always curious on this one. What is you've lit up so much. He's like, oh, I've waited for this.
I want to mention that in this call, I'm going to mention a lot of tools like, Video Tap, for example, that I'm not going to necessarily like endorse right off the bat. And I just want to say I'm going to mention them because they come to mind.
Sure.
A category that I think is overdone, and you might be able to tell from the hat, is clipping. right? There's so many clipping tools on the market, and I am not going to announce any features that came out today or recently, but like even YouTube and Twitch and TikTok have all now have their own Opus Clip alternative built into it. TikTok Smart Stream, I don't know what YouTube's is called right now, but they're just talking about like clips for different streams, and then Twitch is also doing that too. And technically, Spotify does this too for the podcast. They actually technically do like one clip per episode, and they'll make it automatically for you. And it's just one of those things where there's a dime a dozen different clipping tools on the market. We need more types of clipping, different formats, different split views. I've even told Opus Clip this too. Like, we need different views for the podcast. I saw Lewis House come up with a really interesting idea where it was like, okay, it's like really skinny versions of both of us side by side versus having us top to bottom. That's a unique way. It changes up the pace. And I think that even if you're only using it for a couple different scenes, it at least changes the visual flow.
No, and I think you're spot on. It's funny that you mentioned that, because sometimes like there are things when I see it, I'm like, oh great, another version of the same thing. And it's like, there's everyone says a jack of all trades is better than a master of one. They want to be a jack of all trades, but it's better to be a master of one than a master of none. And I feel like some people are trying so hard to be the jack of all trades that they're not mastering the one thing, and they're like, but here's a new feature and another one, and it's like, you didn't do the thing I initially want you to do. And I think that with YouTube tools, if we can transition into that, I am very familiar with this space, but how familiar are you with the YouTube tools? How many have you used? What are your thoughts on those kind of tools? Because they're unique in the realm.
There's something I want to touch on right there, because you kind of prompted me. You only said half the quote, and a lot of people don't know that's only half the phrase. Jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Yeah. And so it's one of those things where a lot of people think that because they're doing too many things, it's not good. But in the long run, you might still end up being, like, at least as a person, maybe not as a tool, you might still end up being better off. Like, I think the script is trying to be a jack of all trades, and I think they're failing at like clipping, for example, but they're mastered, doing like text-based editing, and they've added recordings like this between two people, but they're not necessarily great at clipping just yet, but they can be down the line. And when it comes to your question, I mean, obviously things like TubeSpanner comes to mind. I'm really excited for some other tools that come out when it comes to podcasting. I think that there's going to be more video podcast hosting tools, and they're going to post to YouTube. So we're going to see more influx in that. And there's also just a matter of, what is Nick Nimen's tool called?
Oh, Creator Dashboard.
Yeah. That one I think is pretty cool. It's one of the first things I've like. TubeSpanner and Creator Dashboard are one of the two extensions I've actually installed in recent years. I haven't touched vidIQ. I haven't touched TubeBuddy. I haven't even touched any of the other ones from old times ago, the yesteryears of yore.
You have there goes half my life. I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, though, I think that goes to say funny, though, because like, one thing that I would always get asked as you, buddy, is what are your thoughts on new tools? And I'm like, the more tools there are, the better the other tools will have to be. And I think that, it's funny, on literally a week ago would have been 10 years I was at TubeBuddy. So it's crazy to think about like how much time has gone. And I think that, one thing I think gets lost in the tool conversation, if you're watching this and you're a creative and you're like, oh, I'm trying to get into YouTube tools or any kind of tools, they are built to serve you, not the company. The second they stop serving you and only start serving the company, and this is at any tool in particular, but it's just that situation of, I've seen it happen and happen again, where they lose sight of the community that built them up, and then they wonder what happened. And I mean, it is one of those things that us as creators, if we lose sight of the audience that built us, we can't be surprised if they don't show up anymore,
There's a couple tools that came to mind, and there's a lot of history when it comes to like Streamlabs, and some people really, I guess that's also another YouTube tool, or like people live streaming. There's a lot of live streaming tools that are coming out the last couple of years, and I've talked a lot about that on the blog. But Streamlabs has a bad history. They were kind of like copying OBS. They were like Streamlabs OBS for a while, and people were like really mad. The OBS was really mad about them copying the name. They literally told them, don't use our name. And then they also kept copying tools like Lightstream and stuff like that. And so there was a lot of history there, that, like bad blood. I think over the last few years, though, they've kind of brought it back. They did apologize for some of those transgressions. And there was also a matter of, they've added a lot of cool tools and features to their whole Streamlabs Ultra that kind of made up for it. And there's pretty unique in the market. And what I wanted to bring up is that, like, There is an interesting dynamic as a content creator when you want to be able to do many different things, but you need to have the tools that help you accomplish that. Because as a solo creator, I can't sit there and be going through hundreds of videos to make clips, which is why I came across Opus Clip. I can't be sitting there trying to take those clips and then spread them across many different social channels. I love Opus Scheduler, but I don't use it for my clips. I use something else to actually schedule across a dozen different platforms. And so finding the right tool for you is really important.
No, and I love that you talk about like while you love Opus Clip, you still use something else. And I think that that's something that, obviously there's no harm in all these different tools, having clips. I see from Pearl in the chat, sometimes getting clips is hard, honestly.
Yeah.
And look, there's a reason
Especially
a lot
if
of
you're a
them are
gamer,
doing it. Well, that, or if you're an artist, or if you're a lot of different, there are some tools that might focus in a little bit more than others. I do think, I'm biased. We both like Opus Clip. But
Cool.
I
Yeah.
also think it's a situation of if that's what's working best for you, feel free to use it. I also think, Pearl says, I don't want to be in the dark. They're talking more specifically about art, but you don't want to be in the dark about a lot of things because what you don't know can hurt you. And sometimes what you think you know also can hurt you because it can be unsighted, it can be unsourced. So with all these tools that make all these bold promises, that promise all these things, how do you go with what is just like hyperbolic and what do you do to like actually see if they're being truthful in what they promise?
I'm not sure if I have a full-on answer for the question, but I think that you really have to just test certain different tools. And as someone who's a nerd about tools, I ended up kind of just like testing out many different ones. I was bringing up Streamlabs too because they copied one tool called Join Combo, and that was a gaming clipping tool. It's no longer around. They actually died out because there was too many competitors and they just couldn't keep up, even though they were the originator in the market. And Streamlabs version is called CrossClip. And before Opus Clip came out, I was thinking about how do I make clips for my podcast? Well, I could use Recast Studio or Chopcast at the time to find a small amount of clips in a horizontal format like we are right now, and then use CrossClip to highlight me, highlight you, and make the format that I wanted to. But it was still a little bit too much work. I kind of regret not trying it out more because I should have done that back then, but it was so much work back then. And I think the real kicker is when you're trying out these different tools and comparing, you got to find the one that makes you have to work the least. Like none of the tools, even Opus, is not going to automate the entire process, even if they want to. And I think Opus has talked about that a lot. So some people talk to me at like events. They're like, "Oh, I thought Opus was going to, do the entire thing for me." And there's been a few videos where it's done that, where I literally edited maybe 2 clips out of 36, but which is crazy because I had a really good interview recently that was just perfect for clipping, I guess. But then there's other interviews where I had to edit 28 of them out of 36. And it's kind of crazy. But when I say edit, I might be changing a word here or changing the intro or adding a title card, just minor tweaks. Instead of having to do 2 different tools, finding the clips myself or finding like only a tiny amount of clips in the previous market. They made it a lot easier. And there's going to be more tools and new updates or whatever that's going to make it easier. But depending on what niche and what topic. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of times what I see is like people do want, I call it the easy button. They want it to do everything. They basically wanted to do, I want as minimal interaction as possible. And I think that's kind of like, as we talk about, the AI conversation, some people are like that, where all they want is they feed it, then they're done. And then there are people like you and I who like to get down and dirty and we like to understand how they work and we love to go in that nuance, right? And I think that there is a lot of value in possibly both. Like there is value in it just doing the thing for you, speeding up that time for you, but there's also value in understanding how it works. You often, and from what I've seen and how you write and how you do all these different things, you usually come at it from a mindset, from what I've read, as the person who's going to be using these tools. When you think about that person, is there a specific avatar you have, or is there someone you're trying to talk to when you're testing, or how do you kind of see that person?
It's a good question. I have actually kind of always been against the idea of personas, which might be a topic in of itself. But I try to respect that, like, the SEO experts always push it down my throat when it came to blogging world and actually YouTube world too, eventually. And creating a persona is important, especially when you really want to optimize the way you're messaging your post. But I kind of see it as like, I wanted to have a solution. I've been trying to find a social media marketing tool for over a decade, since I started blogging back in like high school. And I finally found one, but there was a couple different reasons why. There's a couple different reasons why I wanted to need it. There was a couple needs from a tool that no tool could do both, let alone one of them well. And that also what led me down the automation path using Zapier and Make and If This and That. And now that I found that tool, I stopped messing with automation tools as much. So I need to go back in and dig into N8N. So I'm reminding myself to do it. But back to the point of the thing, I wanted to find a solution. I looked everywhere for content repurposing tools before Repurpose.io came out or OpusClip came out. And I was scavenging the internet. I was going on Google, Yahoo, and Bing and looking at the search, images, videos, and news tabs for all three of them and just trying to find anything. And now I was like, for the people like that, that's who I'm making the content for. So it's not really a persona, but it's a person who's desperately trying to find a solution. And I'm just making it for myself, but who might be starting out now.
And I think there are a lot of people like that. As someone who's worked at a tool, boy, you are not alone. And I can tell you that I think what I found, I came from, an inside of a tool, right? And I loved the tool. We did a lot of cool things. We helped a lot of people, millions of people. I can truthfully say we've changed their trajectory in the YouTube world. And that's a crazy idea to think of. But I also will say that what I've learned being on the inside of a tool is that a lot of people think that a tool only works one way. And like, I have to constantly tell people like, no, a tool's a tool. Like right now, Dustin and I can go out in the woods and we can chop a tree down with our bare hands. We could sit there for, let's both be honest, hours, but it could be done. I wouldn't say we want to, but if we had to, we could. But
these soft hands, I don't know.
Well, that's maybe the difference between you and I. I definitely think, I look as someone who's had to do a lot of manual labor. Like your hands are not necessarily moisturizing wasn't a part of the important part.
This is natural. Sorry,
it's all good, all good. But the thing is like we could do that, but an axe would make it easier. A chainsaw would make it easier. And there are lots of tools in there, and each of them have their own purpose. Not one is better than the other. Sometimes an axe usually more cost effective. Chainsaw, faster, but usually pricier. It has other components such as gas. It is multi-layered. A lot of times what I find where people get confused is they only want one part of the tool, but the tool has to pay for all of it, right? Like we go back to the chainsaw needs the chain. It needs a different blade. It needs gas. It needs a lot of different moving parts. So how do you balance when you have something from a tool that you really like only one part, but it comes with a bunch of extra features? How do you find balance? Do you tend to use those extra features or you discard them? I'm just genuinely curious.
I don't know, because maybe when you were talking about the different levels to it, right? Hands, axe, and chainsaw, and maybe think of podcast hosting because it's been front of mind lately.
Sure.
Substack has a lot of issues, but their podcast features is free, and it's one of the few tools that's completely free in the market. RSS.com, I think, is also free, and you could do Spotify for creators, but I don't think it distributes it to Apple and Amazon, so that's an issue.
Sure.
And I bring it up because I want to stop paying for podcast hosting. It's getting so democratized now that using some of the more archaic tools like Libsyn or Buzzsprout or Podbean, and I say that like not trying to offend them, but they are kind of old school. They charge so much for it.
Ask a clarifying question. When you say hosting, because there might be people who don't, you mean self-hosting, correct?
Well, it's basically like they're hosting it for you. You're paying the service to have them distribute your podcast to Spotify, Apple, and Amazon, and wherever. Yeah. So I use Transistor, and I've loved them, and it's a great company, and they're very helpful when it comes to like having any problems, something like that. But they cost a lot. They do give you unlimited podcasts, which is really unique compared to some of their tools, and they have a couple other cool features. But I don't use all of them. I don't really use the embeds that much. I don't really use their podcast website either. I'd rather you go to my main website and listen to the embed on there, or go on Spotify or whatever podcast platform you prefer. And so paying the amount I'm paying doesn't seem logical when there's other free options right now. I don't need the chainsaw when an axe could do the trick and save me income that I need to spend on other tools.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think going back to the axe analogy, Pearl brings up, an axe also needs your strength and core to work. I mean, you don't think us going with our bare hands needs a lot of that too? I think arguably a lot more. But like another thing that a tool does, and this is something that I think people don't necessarily always think of, is time saving. And like, yes, the axe is going to take a little bit different, but compared to our bare hands, it's going to be faster. Chainsaw, probably the fastest, bending the tree, and I understand. But sometimes, there are different tools, different needs for different things. And that's why I asked you that question. I love how you brought it to podcasting and hosting.
I have another analogy too, actually.
Please, let's hear it.
So it made me think of the clipping issue I had before. The manual thing would be me using like DaVinci Resolve and finding the clips in the timeline itself. And so I had that long old timeline of a full hour-long interview and trying to find those minute clips or something like that. It'd be so painful, and that's why I didn't do it. And by the time I really needed to start doing clips, I had over 100 interviews at that point that I needed to actually go back through and clip. And then the chainsaw could be Opus Clip, but it could be expensive to some people. And even though they had like a lot of good deals sometimes, some people can't afford that, especially if they're in a country where it's not like the monetary value is not exchanged well. So having that chainsaw, having that bare hands wasn't going to work. When I could have, hi Stanley, I could have had something like the axe where it would have been like using Chopcast and cross clip to do it. But yeah, I digress. I was waiting for the chainsaw, I guess.
You were waiting for the thing that would do what you need to do, and I think that is another thing. Sometimes tools come from gaps in the market that they identify, and maybe another tool could have fit it. But if you're a tool and you do it first and someone copies you, two things. One, you're probably onto something. And two, you better innovate. Because unfortunately, like, let's look at like Instagram and Snapchat. Snapchat did stories first. Instagram, some people say borrowed the concept. Fun fact, some people might remember this. YouTube had stories at a time. I thought those were a fun idea.
LinkedIn did too.
LinkedIn.
Twitter.
I was told MySpace did, but I've never fact checked it. But who knows?
I forgot MySpace.
Well, there you go. And I think that's something to keep in mind. We're getting a lot of people loving the axe analogy. You get the whole axe for one price, and maybe I look. There are some tools that give you everything you need, and I think that is also the mythical all-in-one tool. I call that my white whale. If any of you have read Moby Dick, like that all-in-one tool is what every creator thinks they want. But there are some costs to that, right? Like, especially, and we'll go back to this, AI is one of those things that is making a lot of all-in-one tools be powered in the background. I saw someone who said on YouTube, I'll never use AI, while they had auto captions, while they were using YouTube's recommendation system, which are, back in the day, it was machine learning. The marketing rebrand is AI. I think the honest conversation is that AI, I think, is interesting. I'm cautiously optimistic. Keyword is very cautious. But I think that when it is used to help, and again, we've had this conversation on the streams before, it can be used to help a lot more than people give it credit to. But I also know the harms. How do you balance, when it comes to AI, like helpfulness versus harm?
I was already kind of thinking of an answer already before you even asked that, because I was thinking that the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule, is really helpful for a lot of people to think about.
Could you say the principle again in case they don't know it?
The Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, because they say that 80% of your effort produces 20% of the results, and 20% of your effort produces 80% of the results. And it's kind of a business mindset in a way too. And while I'm not always for the 80-20 rule, sometimes I like 33, 33, 34 and split things. Maybe that's the polymathy side of things coming out. But
fair.
But I think that like 80-20 really helps with AI usage. So for example, I probably wouldn't be making shorts or short form videos if I didn't have a tool to automate my repurposing side of things. I wouldn't make them from scratch. And so I wouldn't be doing that content format if it wasn't for a tool. Conversely, there's also a YouTube channel that I made originally, way before even Polyinnovator. That was my original blog, and I tried to make a YouTube channel, didn't work. That's what I actually started doing podcasting with, was that previous brand. But that channel's been dead in the water for a long time, and I want to start slowly seeding it for eventual use down the line. So I might use AI for some of the more advanced, maybe Agent Opus, maybe Sora, some of the more advanced kind of motion graphics or, let's say, visualizations that I wanted to use for those topics. I can't make them myself. I don't have the skills for using Blender. I could learn them, but I don't have the time to do so.
Sure.
And so I may not be using Sora for my main channel. I may not be using it for the content polymath content channel. Sure, I might throw in a clip every once in a blue moon if I make something pretty cool. Like I had a DaVinci video and I put that on my channel. That was like, that's very related to my topic, but I'm not going to make a consistent series with it.
I get that. And I think
on that channel, at least.
Well, and that, I'm glad you identified that though, because like a lot of times people will get in the rabbit hole of like one thing worked and they think, oh, I'll just move on from the one thing. And it's like, well, if a restaurant did that, and again, you're serving people in YouTube, I say this a lot, you're in the service industry, you are serving an audience, and you also need to serve yourself, right? Like if you're not served, you're missing out probably arguably the most important person, because you got to be happy with what you make, you got to enjoy it. So I bring that all back to bring it around to that when we're in the art of serving people, so are tools, and they need to serve your needs. And one thing that I think can happen is when all these tools try to serve these things, I see from English Fun Zone, great to see you, you get the whole thing for one price. Like that is a dream from look, as a user, I'd love that. Working on the inside of one though, is there are things that one, you legally can't talk about, like maybe an API raises its price and all of a sudden you got to charge more.
Twitter.
And that,
oh, sorry.
Someone said it, but like that happens more than you'd think. And like, legally you can't talk about it, and that's that where you have to do something, and like being on the inside, it sucks. Like I'll be the first to say it, and a lot of times we'll try to serve our customers, but you're not allowed to say it. If you worked in customer service, sometimes it's that specific store policy, not a company policy, but you have to deal with it. And so when we look at tools, it's something for everyone watching to keep in mind is sometimes a lot of these tools are dead similar. And that's fine. But what I tend to focus on is who are the people behind it? What do they care about? So, Dustin, do you ever take that kind of approach?
I mean, part of what kind of drew me to certain tools were the people behind the camera, like making the content, like the social media marketer or something like that. In fact, what got me back more interested in Uscreen was one of the previous social media marketers was doing really well, Madison, and she was doing a great job of just like really making engaging content. She eventually left there, like I think like peacefully and whatnot. But, it got me back into watching Uscreen's content because I looked into them ages ago. And then I started seeing Rob at conferences more, and I started seeing the company there more, and I connected with the team. I don't use it myself, but when people want to have an alternative to YouTube, I usually mention it within the first few tools that I mentioned. And then there's the aspect of who are making the tools themselves behind it, like the coders, the CEOs. And so especially when I go on Twitter and I find a new tool, I look on like their page and like, oh, founded by so-and-so, made by so-and-so. And I like to look at their profiles and see who's doing it. Sometimes I connect with founders, and some of my early interviews were actually with founders like Repurpose.io. Literally, so this is a little funny story. I found Repurpose.io randomly on a rabbit hole after scrolling a whole bunch on like Google. And it was like, again, one of the first repurposing tools on the market. And so when I found it, I was like awestruck. And I found myself just like scanning through their website, looking at every single page and just trying to like absorb as much of it as possible. I reached out to them on their little chat thing. And this is pretty early on. Like this might have been like 2018, 2019, something like that. And I ended up messaging the guy, and he messaged back, and it ended up being one of the founders.
Wow.
And we just hopped on a call. I started yapping about tools and repurposing, and just like, he wasn't trying to sell it to me. We were just like talking about it. I'm like so interested in about it. And we're still friends to this day. Like I met him in person for the first time, actually, after like 5 years at Vid Summit this year. And it was just one of those things where like no time had passed, and it was really great to see him. And so shout out to Handy there. But it's just like, finding a tool and finding people behind a tool is really great. And that makes you more confident in the tool's success too.
Yeah. And I think, I wanted to just take a moment to thank a lot of the people here. I know you followed me over from TubeBuddy, and thank you for that trust as someone in a tool, right? Like I don't take that for granted for a second. I think that it is an incredible thing. And I think that, that's something I would tell you if you're thinking about a tool, look at the people who are making it. Where are they sourcing their ideas from? Are they as open as you had described? Will they hop on a call? Some will. Obviously, a lot of people are busy. That's not a down thing. But if they are, that goes to a level of care, right? And I look for companies that care about their creatives. A lot of people don't know this. They know me for my YouTube chops, but I got my start in communities for YouTube. I started in CMS communities, so I helped run a couple of different forums with hundreds of thousands of people. So that's why I always focus on you watching. And you, Dustin, and me, Andrew, right? Because we're all yous. You could be plural. It doesn't need to be a single. YouTube, dang it. Dustin's like Jesus.
All right, the cringe level went a little hot.
No. The cringe is always at 10 if you're with me.
With you and me, it's 11. It's okay.
But like, I think as we look at all these tools, and especially, as they're implementing AI, one of the things you lose with that, and I think the tools that use AI respectfully and smartly, use it to empower the creatives that could save them time, right? And I see from In and Out About with yours truly, Liz OC, they said, I'm not a fan of AI for videos. I do use Google search to get information to add to my videos. So AI overview helps. And I think there's a difference, even in AI, right? That's a different tool. There's generative AI, and then there's more research focused AI. And I think that, you mentioned Opus Clip. They have their agent Opus that does a lot of individualistic things such as research, motion graphics. What I use generative AI for is when I hire an artist, instead of me trying to roughly explain it, and I'm really bad at doing it, I give a terrible mock-up, similar to, more proficient storyboard artist. And I'm like, make this better.
Yeah.
because I am not able to do that. And I actually used that recently where I was working with someone and I could not describe what I wanted. I couldn't get it to like work in a visual, like in a non-visual format. And I threw it into Agent Opus Motion Designer tool and they immediately got it and they're working on it. And like the drafts they've sent me, and again, keep in mind, I know that I'm a unique case. Not everyone will do this, but that's how I am. I want to give a creative. My friends over the years have gotten on to me for paying them. They're like, you don't have to pay me. I'm like, if I say pay artists and I don't pay my friends, what does that say about me? Damn it. No.
Well, I think there's a certain level of usage. So I don't necessarily. Like, I'm kind of in the middle ground when it comes to this. It came up in conversation recently on a recent episode of my PolyTools Creator Spotlight show, where we're talking about AI and like how much you should use it. And I know a lot of artists really hate AI, and that's fine. I fair like content creators as well. But there's also the matter of if I can't create the visuals, like I said earlier for that previous YouTube channel, I want to try to like at least create some concept art, if not post those, and then later down the line make more official stuff. So in the meantime, use an AI for just for the time being, or like you said, you're making it for storyboard. One thing I haven't think we've ever talked about is that what got me into ChatGPT and DALL-E and all these AI tools way back at the tail end of 2022, early 2023. I was messing with these tools to try to make my own monster taming game. And while I didn't fully get into like building it per se, I was using it to come up the concept art for different creatures. I had the ideas already. I just needed a way to visualize it. And then I wanted to hire hire a human artist to take the AI concept and make it into a consistent art style.
Yeah, and in fact, some video games recently have gotten into kind of a little bit of hot water because they use they've been using placeholder AI generations to give them and humans later to use it, right? And I know there's been 50-50 on that. I think for me, I know my limitations, and that's why I hire an artist who's better than me. And like I see from Pearl in the chat, I will say, Andrew, there are a lot of artists who won't work with you if you generate the idea over getting it, getting a random image on Google just happens to be AI. It's a trust thing. I usually have been upfront. I've had zero issue, but that could also just be the artist I've hired. I would say, it's going to be different for everyone. I think it is one of the situations where I am always upfront and I try to be, and actually this was a situation where I asked, can I do this before I even did it? I didn't just go full steam ahead. And they're like, actually, yeah, because they look, we were doing our best there on Fiverr. Sometimes, you try to do your best to hire people and it's hard because like you don't know what you don't know. And it goes back to that knowledge gap. So they were okay with it, but I wouldn't just go full steam ahead and do that. I'm always trying to lead and be upfront. There are times I've missed, like sometimes in older videos, I didn't cite the sources at the time, but they're now cited now, right? Like you learn and improve. And I think that's something that people don't understand tools do too. Like you mentioned Streamlabs OBS. You said that they kind of come around. I think one thing that's lost is that sometimes don't give malice where stupidity will fit, And I think that's important.
Well, the Streamlabs too, they wanted to be kind of that all-in-one jack of all trades tool, and I think they're probably one of the closer ones to doing it. There was another tool that came to mind earlier, Riverside.fm, and I think they're trying to be jack of all trades and failing. So it's kind of two different dynamics there. I think Streamlabs is actually doing a good job about it, whereas Riverside, they copied Opus Clip pretty early on with their magic clips, and I was one of the first people to compare the two. And out of the last year and a half, I used Riverside a decent amount for recording podcasts. I've tried using their magic clips multiple times over the year and a half, 2 years. I've gotten maybe 2 clips that were decent out of everything they've given me, over 100 different videos. And it's kind of crazy just how bad their clipping tool is. Some people actually use it, and I'm like, cool, especially if you're just making it yourself and choosing your own timestamps. But I just don't like it. But conversely, they're one of the better audio enhancement tools. Like Adobe Podcast and Riverside Magic Audio are 2 of the best ones. And I mean, actually, Adobe Podcast is the best, but if you can't afford that, if you're not using that, I use Riverside a lot. And it's interesting because, like, I think a lot of people just don't know that.
Well, I also want to mention that both of them have free versions, though there are limits to them. One thing I think is interesting is, what are your thoughts on freemium tools? Because a lot of people are like, I'd rather just pay for it. But as someone who worked for, again, I'll be upfront, TubeBuddy is a freemium tool. It has a free version and paid versions. And what I found as someone who worked there is that the free version, and again, I worked on community, so what I thought of is, if we're a free tool, let's have free ways that you can earn the tool, and that did very well at the time for them. But that's because as a community person, I would want to be able to find a way to earn something for free. You know, because if I love a tool, sometimes I can't afford it. I've been a broke
Yeah.
college kid. I've been broke, unfortunately, more than once in my life, and I know what it's like. So, what are your thoughts on freemium?
That actually, going back to the PolyTools database, it ended up being kind of a issue at one point where I was trying to figure out, are these tools paid? Are they free? And you go to their landing page and they don't really say anything about that. You go to their pricing page and it's kind of like blocked. There was a few tools that literally like would make you want to go do a demo. And at that point, I'm almost like deleting them off the database because I'm like, if you're not going to be upfront about your costs, then I'm not going to put you on there, put you out. But I think that freemium is good. And depending on how they do it, like sometimes some tools will give you just a very minuscule amount of free credits. And I'm like, guys, I can't even test the tool because I can't put my hour-long interview in there or something like that. And even if I put in a solo video, then I'm still not getting the full range of testing for that tool. But then conversely, sometimes the paid, like I'm getting more and more warmed up to Beehive, but their free plan is good, but all the features are hidden behind their paid plans, and their paid plans are super expensive for Beehive. And I'm calling them out publicly about it. Like, this is like an insane price. I mean, granted, compared to Kit, they're not much more expensive and they offer more features, but compared to Ghost or compared to Substack, they're just like way too expensive. And so I think that as long as they're upfront about it and the free plan doesn't suck, like literally you just can't use it, then they generally have a good board with, like, good with me, I feel like.
I think that's a very fair way to look at it. I am always a fan of a free option. I think especially if like
even if there's a watermark or something, you know.
Yeah, well, I know some people have hard opinions on watermarks. I think that, you know, especially if you're getting used or started to something, it's okay. Like people forget every winner's once a beginner, and you know, there are limits on a lot of different things. Whether it is, you know, limits to closeness, that can proxy can be a huge differentiator. I think that having something for free that can give you a taste of it, like StreamYard, that's what we're using right now. They have a free version, it has a watermark. I would say that obviously I would love there to be no watermark, but I also understand that if I want this thing to exist, there's got to be a give and take.
Yeah.
But I want to know, what are, like, when you are thinking of give and take, what do you think is too much to give when trying a tool? Are there limits for yourself?
What came to mind is like, I don't mind watermarks, but I would hate it if it's 720p. Like I probably wouldn't use a tool if it's only 720p. I want 1080p as a base minimum, even if there's a huge old watermark in the corner. I would rather have that higher resolution. One of my issues with Riverside, for example, even on the paid plan, is that it's limited to only 24 FPS, and that's a huge deal to me. I think that's too low for content nowadays. 30 FPS is a minimum. So there's certain features I think is the issue where it's like, if it's too free, like Substack has a lot of free things, but they have a lot of tech issues too. In fact, I left Substack recently because there's too many issues. I think because they're free, they're just having a hard time like catching up with all the glitches, and they don't have enough big enough team to have a customer support. There's no way to contact Substack at all. And like you can message them, but they won't respond back, and you can tweet at them and they just won't respond. And as someone who has had beta features for years to them, I have no way of contacting them when I have issues. Whereas like when I've partnered up with other companies like Opus Clip or Tube Spanner or something like that, and use the tools and message to people from the teams like, hey, I encountered this, you know, you get like almost an immediate response, or at the very least a very like thoughtful response. When it came to like Opus back in the day where it might take a week to respond, but they gave you a good response.
Yeah, and I think, you know, what I usually say, if you're reaching out to a company or a tool, give 48 hours or 2 business days. Because if you reach out like on a Saturday night, like some people want a response that next hour. I'm like, you got to be realistic as well. Like there might be an answer, but I think 48 hours is, at least in my head, is a standard. Now, if it's like life or death or very important, that's obviously, there's always an exception. Yeah. But I wanted to go back. We're seeming to have a really deep conversation in AI and also just tools. Tech Fairy Anna says, I can't pay for any more tools. How do you feel as someone who's reviewed so many? What is your response to this? I'm very curious on this thought process of I can't pay for any more tools. I want to see Dustin's thoughts.
So, I mean, I mentioned earlier how like I can't pay for more tools either. Like I'm pretty broke right now too. I make money from content. I make money from memberships and stuff like that. But a lot of my income for paying for these tools comes from like a day job. And so I had to come out of pocket when it comes to like when I first joined with Opus, I paid for a whole year. And before I became a partner, and like burned through that within like a week because I had so much content to go through. And so I know that pain, and it's good to see Tech Fariana on there because I know that channel. It's a really great channel and really awesome creator. And so it's just one of those things where I think that if you can downsize, like you said, there's no all-in-one, and I really wish there was.
Mhm.
And as a knowledge management person, that's what I like. It's one of my expertise is knowledge management tools. I'm trying to make Obsidian into my all-in-one tool, but it doesn't have a calendar feature, for example, so I can't make it my all-in-one. And task management's kind of meh. And so it's like I can't make it my all-in-one, but I'm trying to. And so if you can find a free alternative, you can go to like open source alternative to I think so. I don't know the URL, but that's basically the website. And you can also go in like r/side projects, r/microsas, and sometimes you'll find cool projects on there that are making a similar tool to what you might use. Like right now, I want to find an alternative to Calendly because I can't be paying for Calendly right now, and so I might use something like Google Suite if I'm already paying for that and just move over to that. Finding a way to consolidate or downsize is, I think, is the answer.
No, and I think that is more than fair. I think that, consolidation and figuring out what is no longer working for you, especially if you can't or don't want to pay for any more tools, that goes back to, use what works best for you, which is, I think, especially when it comes to the YouTube tools, is super important. That was something people would give me flack for. They're like, well, why won't you just recommend the tool you're working for? I'm like, because it may not be the best fit for you, and that's okay. We can't, like, if you're building something for everyone, the old adage is you're building something for no one.
I agree.
And another thing is, and I maybe this is the, the historian in me, but all in one to me sounds like a monopoly, and I don't like that at all. So I want competition. I really do, because like sometimes the only way tools get better is if there is competition. Likewise to artists, right? I think that what a lot of people don't know, I studied art history in school. I really find it fascinating is a lot of the greats, especially of the Renaissance era, they borrowed and copied one another pretty blatantly. They were
Feel like an
not
artist.
shy about it, but they put their own spin on it. And I think that's where, you know, that's where I think, especially with the AI conversation, is it's like, well, who's putting the spin? Is it actually a person? AI by itself, I think AI, the product and the tool, gets a lot of flack for the people actually building it. Going back to who's building it? What do they have in your interest there? And like that's where I tend to look at, and I always look that way because who are the people behind the thing that I'm using? Who is who is actually the wizard? If you guys understand that reference,
Behind the curtain.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So again, we've talked about a lot about this is trust, and there's a lot of trust and bias. I came, like I said, my bias was I was working at a tool company. I know what my bias is, and it was hard for me to not hard. I would openly say I'm biased because that was a great way. But so as someone who reviews tools and you're pretty independent, how do you stay objective? I'm just genuinely curious on that.
I think from the beginning, I was trying to say that I'm pretty agnostic about tools. And someone asked me recently, a friend of mine, reference images, steal like an artist, like I was trying to say there. Like, it's interesting though, when it comes to tools, I think in the last year, I've definitely gotten a little bit more biased when it came to like Opus Clip and New Link. Like I mentioned earlier, the social media management tool that I want to use, New Link is the one that finally unified the needs I needed. I needed a tool that could do bulk upload for short form videos, mainly because I had so many from Opus. This was before they had a social scheduler too, but mind you. And then the other issue was I needed to have RSS to social media automation. And there was only a few tools that could do it, and they didn't really do it super well. And so that's why I got into Make and Zapier, because I was trying to automate when I made a new YouTube video or podcast, send it out to social media so I don't have to worry about it. Again, automation is not great, but if it helps you make a huge difference and go wider, you can still go on there and make posts on those sites. Fine line of stealing, yeah. And so like there's a aspect behind being agnostic between the tools, and I'll still give a tool a fair shake, even if there's a tool. I mean, I'm a partner with Opus, as you know, and so I want to make sure that's clear. But
likewise,
I'm still
same.
And so I was like, I want to make sure, like, if I'm testing a new AI clipping tool, I'm not gonna like, oh, they're not Opus, so I don't want to tie it. Like, no, I'm gonna give them a fair shot and actually test it out and see if it's good or not. My frame of reference is gonna now be from Opus, but I'm gonna still give it a fair shot. I'm actually doing it here soon with another clipping tool just to see what's going on with the updates for it. And so it's just interesting to think about. Yes, I love Opus Clip. Yes, I love New Link, and those are the tools I use most of the time. But I'm still going to look at other social media management tools, and that's actually going to help, because if I say, "Hey, Opus is still the best," after testing out that new one, then that people can respect my opinion more because I still looked at both. I still looked at all of them.
True. I think that comparison, sometimes what one tool does, the other might not do, and that's what that person really needed. And I think that's important to distinguish too. because I like you can review anything, right? We're talking a lot about software tools here today,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of different tools, you know, and that's when I think someone as yourself is invaluable, especially someone who's put the hours in and who's really worked on it. I also love what English Fun Zone says, and they said, I want to get a menu of tools to choose from and pay
Mhm.
the fee, knowing I will have what I need, what I
Mm.
want and need.
A menu of tools is an interesting way. I should write that down. It's an interesting way of explaining it because I don't necessarily know. Actually, what I'm doing right now for the newsletter is I made a top tier list. Like here's top 3, top 5, top 10 of all the tools and all my 30 plus categories. And I think
Hmm.
that's kind of like a menu like she's talking about there. And I'm scheduling those out one a week until next July. And so you'll be able to like at least explore like, hey, here are the best tools in that category as of that writing. I'll try to go back and update them if things dramatically change. But I think that having a menu or an automation stack is really kind of crucial. When I first started doing automation before New Link, I was using Zapier, if this and that, and a little bit of Make, I think, which was Integromat back in the day.
Hmm.
And I had all three set up using their free plans because I couldn't afford to pay for Zapier paid plan. It's not like it really helped much either because it only gave you like 2 more zaps. And they kept
Fair.
breaking. They kept breaking too. Zaps break all the time. But my point is, I had 3 different tools because I just needed to accomplish having 6 different platforms for the social media automation or whatever it was. And so I had to like make my little tech stack because it was free, and I had to just do what I could. Duct tape it together.
You had to do what you had to do. And you know, you talk about stacks, you talked about automation. Maybe if someone doesn't know, what is an automation stack?
Mm. It's something I want to talk more and more about, and I have an upcoming post ideally here soon. But I was thinking like, okay, you're not going to have a tool that's going to be an all-in-one per se. And I think that really trying to hope for that is just going to be temporarily delusional. And I, as someone who wants that as well. But I hear a little bit of laughter, I think, on the other side there. But it's
I do. Yeah.
it's funny though, because like you're gonna have to minimize the amount of tools. Like Tech Fairy Anna was saying, like she just can't afford another tool on the market right now, right? So try to minimize, downsize the stack as much as possible, but you might have to add in another free tool here and there, something like that. And sometimes tools change. So for example, when I came up with the idea for the content automation stack post, I was using Substack at the time. And Substack has a unique automation where if you make a video post, it'll automatically post it to YouTube, which didn't always work, mind you. And there were some issues with it when it came to SEO and thumbnails and all that jazz. But it was a cool automation. It was unique. And they also take that same video, cut out the audio, and make it into a podcast and distribute it to the platforms for you. And that did work really well. And then it actually does clips too. And the clips are actually pretty decent. I would say the Substack clips are better than the Riverside clips, which is hilarious. But that's like, that was part of the stack. And then from there, I had New Link to distribute it across many different social platforms. And then I had OpusClip to make clips because I preferred them over Substack clips. But if I couldn't afford it, I would just use Substack clips. So at least then you're getting a few clips and posting something short form video across platforms.
Sure. And I think, you know, the more automation, I think what, you know, you're either paying with money or your time.
Yeah,
And I
time.
think time is what I care the most about because a lot of creators, especially younger creators, and I saw Beanie was mentioning this a little bit, you know, younger, more modern day younger artists weren't around and to appreciate the time when traditional artists treated Photoshop, you know, as something to be shunned.
Or
That's very
Canva.
true. Or Canva or
Canva was
Figma.
shunned for a while.
Yeah. And now it's funny because I think that a lot of times it's forgetting what you had to do or forgetting those early days, right? Like I am so happy that YouTube is easier than ever. And I do mean that. It is easier than it has ever been. We have click-through rate data. We didn't always have that. We have thumbnail A/B testing for free
Yeah, so
from
cool. It's
YouTube.
so cool.
It's also title. And like there's so many things now that are all free and included. The inspiration tab, there's so much cool stuff. But the cost of free is usually the data of you and me.
Oh yeah, privacy is another whole topic we will talk about another day too. I was talking
That
to a
we
friend about it
could.
today, and I'm like, I don't necessarily mind, having some of my stuff tracked sometimes every once in a while, or certain companies know about me. But privacy is where I kind of draw the line sometimes. I'm not super uptight about it, but I'm like concerned still.
But if you are out there, I want you to have that ability. I really just want the freedom of choice here, if you
Yeah.
couldn't tell. That's what I kind of really believe when it comes to tools here. And like I think that is ultimately what I would say if you were considering, you know, growing on YouTube or trying to make a proper YouTube channel, is when you're trying to make a proper YouTube channel, is you really owe it to yourself to test these things. Go deep, really experience it because you don't know otherwise. And
Mhm.
I think that, you know, whether it's your automation stack that you were just mentioning there, Dustin, and or it is, you know, going deep on stuff that you enjoy, I think ultimately it's important. One, opinions can change. I think that's something that I've also had to explain to people is like opinions can change, knowledge can change. You got to also know your audience. You don't need to know your data. And like, here's a great example of knowledge and things changing. What Dustin and I say right now in 5 years might and probably will change as more has developed. And that's okay. YouTube is a long game.
Sorry about that. I'm not trying to interrupt
you.
No,
no, please do.
Something came up to mind, like an opinion of mine changed, and it's really interesting because it comes back to SEO and it comes back to YouTube. Someone whose my main niche was about polymathy, especially back then, that was like what I defined my niche as being someone who's multifaceted, multidisciplinary, multi-niche. I found myself very conflicted. And I was talking to Nick Dimon, I think probably you and even some other YouTubers when I first started the content creator show too about this. And, I started my gaming channel as a separate channel because I just knew from the get-go I was going to be a variety gamer. If I was just doing one game and I was only doing live streams every once in a blue moon, I might just keep that on my personal brand channel that's about polymathy. That was my personal brand. It's about, it's me. But gaming isn't necessarily the same as knowledge management or the audience that I had built up on that channel. And I knew that I was going to play many different games from the get-go. And so it was going to be wide-ranging, already going to be, because of that, it's going to be hard to niche down on a wide channel. So I made it separate. But I had a really hard time accepting the fact that I needed to make the content creator channel as a separate channel. I started doing tool reviews and content creator interviews when I had you on my main channel. It wasn't until about like 5 interviews in where I finally decided I need to move this over. So I moved the interviews over. I started doing new reviews on the new channel. And from there, that channel has gotten even more traffic. And I realized they were stifling each other because of the niches. They were just clashing a little bit and there wasn't enough breathing room. And so my opinion that I was very adamant about not making another channel, I sucked it up and I made a new one, and I'm glad I did. I'm glad my opinion changed.
Yeah. And I think, I think a few things have been lost in time, especially in the internet. If you're on it a little too much, like admittedly I am at times, is that sometimes, it's not that serious and sometimes it is. And it's important to really check yourself. When is it that serious and when isn't it? When is something worth doing or investing in, such as a tool? When is, when you're trying to make a proper YouTube channel, these are all things you need to think about, And I think, as I'm thinking out loud and we're going through this, one of the things people might want to do is get a pretty good and trusted resource. And one of mine is actually right here in this call. So I would love to give the floor over. And Dustin, why don't you explain a little bit more about your website and where people can find you?
So kind of going back to the whole YouTube SEO thing, I found myself, testing out different tools like Substack or Beehive and even Review from Twitter when that was still a thing. And I had all these different newsletter tools and blogging tools. And I was like, you know what? I just love how this new theme really kind of showcases the different niches that I have all in one place. And so I actually, I made a different arm, like a different channel, and I brought it back. So there's a difference between YouTube SEO and regular SEO. True. And I think YouTube's smart enough to know when you're becoming a variety person, but depending on the niche, you'll grow slowly. But on my main website there, what you're looking at, it's one of those things where that I found like, I think you can still find what you want on here. You can go into the content, you can look into swimming stuff, the gaming stuff, and find what you want. And this channel that I put here for the different content creation or the PIOS, I wanted you to be able to explore and go down your own rabbit holes. And so the Polyinnovator.space is the website. And I found that being able to showcase every different topic all in one place in a nice visual format. I even started a travel Substack at one point, and then when I depreciated it for the content one, I just added the blog post to my site. And so there's a lot of exploration there. I try to prioritize the tags there too. So you have like the content one early on. Yeah. And you can see on the content one and swimming one that you're on now, the colors changed based on the niche. That was really fun. I need to go on there and do it for all of them, but yeah.
I love that you have a search. So let's see how well optimized this is.
I don't have any posts on you, buddy. Sorry. I don't have any posts on each interview.
You don't have our interviews?
I have a channel.
Here I was talking about how much I like your site, but you know what? Things change.
No, hold on. Right there. No, go back.
Oh, see how quick he's like, go back.
I need to do this for my content creator show.
Sure.
But the Polycast tag that you were on, I had a post for each season of the interviews. So the other interview show I have at the top there, the Polymath season 2, season 3. And so on those posts, I have all the guests, and I'm going to do that for each of the content creator ones, maybe like 1 through 25 and then 25 through 50, and basically have a post for all the different guests, including yourself. So that way people can find you on this site. Actually, what I wanted to do was make a Substack or some sort of newsletter for each of the podcasts that I have.
Smart.
And that way I could have written posts for each one. It's just the way I want to make those posts is a bit more convoluted than I needed to make it be. So like, I had to go in there and do that. But I want to do it so you have a post for yourself.
I was joking mostly. I know, there's no serious thing here. But what I will say is, as you are developing or working on your own YouTube channel or anything when it comes to tools, Dustin's a great resource. You should definitely check out his website. Everything's linked in the description. If you'd like to learn about anything else, please let us know. I thought we had some really great conversations here in the chat. And if you're watching this in replay, please share yours as well. I'm Andrew Can, joined with my great friend Dustin, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.